Irish traveler woman, Teresa Nevin's message to her in-laws, after they moved her father-in-law's body to England, without telling her husband.
This is Simon Evans, Teresa. This was gone out to Simon's dirty, scummy family in England. His mother and his brothers, and all the ones that went behind Simon's back and lifted his father, God rest his soul, today. Lifted him from Ballymote and brought him over to Luton. The cheeky ye dirty low-lighted scumbags, they lift Martin Nevin and bury him in Luton without telling his own son Simon.
I have to agree with her. Her husband had a right to know that his father's body was getting moved from Ireland to England.
Was Simon a dog? Was Simon a nobody? That ye didn't tell him that ye lifted his father? Ye, in the last 3 months, is trying to tell Simon to go back over to England. And I know the reason now why was to brainwash him, to get around him, but ye knew that's something that Simon would never agree with. Because ye knew if Simon was with me, I would have told Simon the truth, didn't ye? Ye knew I'd tell Simon the truth and Simon wouldn't agree. I'd tell Simon the wrongs that you were doing. But that's the reason ye wanted Simon to leave me. So I wouldn't be able to tell Simon right from wrong, yeah? In the end, that didn't work. Yesterday evening, it started off a few weeks ago. After us coming back 3 months ago, when you were constantly on the phone to Simon to go back over for a dirty, shitty bit of hawking of a court case. When that didn't work, when Simon said he'd sort that out again, you started putting down that Simon was gone sick back here. Perhaps I had him gone sick, yeah? And it wasn't he, had him gone sick the last 3 years.
Depression and mental health issues can be serious, and moving his father's body, without him even knowing it, is not going to help his mental health in any way.
It was Simon's bunk that he was sitting in when he got sick. When I was 3 days back here, and when I went over, you had him gone sick. Yeah? It wasn't my bunk he was sitting on, Anne. It was yours. You blame me the last 3 years, and you left a lot of lies on me. But the whole world will know the truth now.
Having Simon's family and wife blaming each other for his mental health issues is not going to help him in any way.
In the end, you tried. The poor, childish excuse that Simon was gone sick back here, but the whole country back here knows that Simon hasn't been gone sick, yeah? The only reason you wanted to get him over to England, you didn't even tell him that you were lifting his father. You didn't even tell him that you were getting him buried in Dunstable. Simon was going back over to England again yesterday. And he's flight, and I'll send out the tickets in a minute, was booked for 7:30 yesterday evening. And it was the power of our Lady and our Lord that Simon turned around in that taxi and came back for his wife and children. Because as far as I believe, it was his father was watching over him. And didn't give him the power to go over there, because his father knew that Simon wouldn't be able to face another funeral. You know Simon is depressed. You know Simon is not 100% recovered, which I never said from day one that he was. You tried to trick him in to go over to his father's funeral. And you were about 10 times on the phone to Simon yesterday. Every day telling him to go over, but you hadn't got the decency to tell him that you were bringing his father over. What were you going to do if he to land over yesterday evening, Anne? When he was sitting in your bunk last night, what would you have done, Anne? Would you turn around, Simon? We may as well tell you your daddy's funeral is in the morning.
I have to agree with her. That would have definitely pushing him or anyone over the edge.
But for God's sake, he buried his father 17 years ago. He threw clay over his father's grave, and he grieved for his father 17 years ago. Did you want to drive him back down sick? Or what are you going to do this morning? What are you going to say to Simon? Do you want to take a spin to shop, or do you want to take a spin off somewhere else? And what? Turn him up at his father's grave. Did you want him brought out in a white straight jacket? Did you? Did you? Do you really want to push Simon over the edge? But what you're up to do now, ye did. Simon had as much say in his father's grave than what ye had. Simon paid pound to pound in that burial from day one, and that plot, and his father's headstone. When Simon worked and put an honest bit of living hawking into that. When Simon's brothers didn't even have the price of his father's burial. And they didn't have the price of his headstone. And Simon had to cover their share of it. And if you want me to go any further and name names, I will. Simon had as much say when he paid year shares 2 of his brothers that didn't have the price of his father's burial.
If he paid 3 shares, then I'd say he had more of a say than any of his brothers and sisters.
And they didn't have the price of a headstone. When they had slaughters and looting sight many times before that headstone, when John Evans' family had to come out and stop them. Isn't that right? You know I'm telling the truth here. When your other brothers, Simon told two of your brothers that they had 12 months to pay for a headstone, why hadn't they got the price of it? But then, Simon, they took it out of your hands today. They took that out of Simon's hands today. But then, Martin, God rest him, God may give him a good bed in heaven. He chose that burying ground. He will never rest. God rest his soul, he will never rest in England. Because when he died, Anne, recall back, Anne, some of your family wanted him buried in Ballinadreen. And some of them wanted him buried in Ballymote. And Anne, the word you said, that was nearly 17 years ago. No, I'm bringing Martin to Ballymote. Because the last time Martin was back in this country and he went around to that graveyard visiting all the graves. And when he came out to the gate, Patrick and Winnie and you was there. And he turns around to the tree and says, you're probably wondering what delayed me coming out. He said, I was only picking out my old plot. Ye took him away from a grave that he was buried in for 17 years. You'll have no look for that, Anne. Ye will have no look for that. But Anne, I'll tell you something now. I will fix something that you broke 40 years ago. I'll tell you this now, yeah? I'll tell you this one, I'll remind a lot of people out there the wrong that you done, Anne. The last few years, Anne, your family has already said that they had give up Ballymote, that they were getting buried in Dunspell. But one thing Simon always said, he'd be buried beside his father. And that was in Ballymote, Anne. But you think now that you're off deciding Simon's burying ground. I'll tell you for nothing. I'll tell you now. To help of God, Simon lived for 100 years and I'll live for 100 years. But I will tell you now exactly where Simon and my burying ground is going to be. And from day one, 40 years ago, you bullied Martin Navan. You bullied him when his mother, old Kathleen Navan, our grandmother, God rest her, her burying ground was in Longford, where Big Pat Navan should have been buried, where his burying ground was. Because your family, your people's burying ground, Anne, was in Ballymote. You bullied Martin into burying old Kathleen Navan, God rest her, God may give her good bed in heaven. You brought her to Ballymote, where there wasn't one of her people buried in it, Anne, because there was a Bumby's burying ground and your burying ground. Now, Anne, 40 years later, that's the reason Martin Navan was buried there, Anne, wasn't it? Because his mother was buried there alone. Yeah? 40 years later, Anne, you took Martin from his burying ground and you brought him over to England because your people give up their burying ground in Ireland, Anne. But let me tell you something, you have say, 100 million% you had say over where Martin went. God rest him in vain, because you are his wife, and you had every right, and even if Simon had to know, Simon wouldn't have been able to stop you. But the same way you had that right today, Anne, listen carefully, Anne, and listen carefully, Martin Navan's sons. I am Simon's wife, and I have full say over where he goes in time to come.
Yes, you're 100% right, but what if you go first, and his family convinces him to bring you to England with them? And as you said, it doesn't matter what your family will say. It will be his say, and his say only.
And with the help of God and our blessed Lady, Simon will live for 100 years. 100 years, and the help of God I will as well. But Simon's burying ground and my burying ground will be where his grandmother and his father should have been buried in years. This is Longford. I will bury Simon in years and years to come. The help of God when he lives a long life, a very, very long life, and where his children, his grandchildren, the help of God. And he will be buried where his great-grandparents is buried in Longford, and where all his granduncles is buried, and where his grandmother and his father should have been buried from day one, and you took that into your hands. But Anne, you broke that 40 years ago. But I'm going to refix things for ye now. Ye keep Stopsley, ye keep looting. But let me tell ye, I'm his wife, the same way you had to say today, Anne. I'll have it over Simon. And Simon will be buried in his proper original burying ground.
I think you should make a will, and put that in it, just in case you go first, and his family convinces him to bring you to England.
And let me tell you one thing, Anne, and ye. Were ye that cruel that put Simon down as a stranger, did not have the decency? You're constantly on the phone to him to go to England. You're on the phone to him and about 10 times yesterday. You hadn't got the decency to tell him. But this was a long, long process. You couldn't have got this done overnight. This was pre-planned. You hadn't got the decency to tell Simon that you were lifting his father and bringing his father to England.
But family secrets are hard to keep, especially with the big families that travelers have. I'd say at least one of the brother-in-laws or sister-in-laws let it slip to their family, so there is a big chance that even though Simon did not know about his father being brought to England, an outsider did.
But that'll eat away with you for the rest of your lives. Because know what? God rest Martin Avon, God may give him a good bed in heaven. Martin Avon is not going to rest over there. He's going to haunt you for the rest of his life. He's going to haunt you. You will never get forgiveness for what you done. Now, do you know what? You can reply to me as much as you want. You can make WhatsApps. I don't care. Yeah, to be honest with you. Because the whole world knows now how evil and how sick you are. Do you pretend to be concerned about Simon the last 3 years when you drove him sick? You were that concerned about Simon, you would have told him that you were lifting his father and burying his father in England. But let me tell you one thing. After this WhatsApp, I'm not replying to you anymore. I'm washing you out of my hands. You don't exist in me. You don't exist in my children. And you don't exist to Simon. And if I have it in my power for the dry, dirty act that you done to Simon today, to Simon, you will never in life talk to Simon. And you will never in life see Simon. And if you do, it'll be against my will. And you can beg as much as you want to get Simon back off to England. It'll be over my dead body. Because I would rather, because this is going to drive Simon over the edge now, but you'll blame me for it, won't you? You'll blame me for lifting your father and bringing him off to England. You're manipulative liars. You will come up with something. But I will tell you something. That I would rather sign Simon into the hospital in Blanchardstown, a psychiatric hospital, to get the proper help that he needs, than head him over to his sick, mental family. Do you know the family that his brother could ring up a doctor and pretend to be Simon to get Simon extra medication a few months ago? You know which brother I'm on about here? That I'm getting you locked up for, because every phone call is recorded. What kind of doctors had you gotten Simon in England? What doctor prescribed strong medication for Simon for 3 years without seeing Simon for 3 years? And one of his brothers could ring up a doctor constantly and pretend to be Simon, pretend to act a sick man on the phone to be Simon, to get Simon prescribed stronger medication. You done that in April, didn't you? Didn't you? You know who I'm on about? But I'm getting you locked up for that, for fraud. I'm getting you locked up. And you know what? Get back to me. I dare you get back to me. Because I have 18 years of books to write about you. Good luck to you. You'll have no luck for what you done today.
I must give credit to the original creator of this video, Tom Traveler, sharing